There was a time in my life where every single stumble felt deeply personal. If something didn't work out, I would see it as proof that I wasn't good enough. If I lost a sale, it was confirmation that I didn't belong in my role. And even the smallest misstep could send me spiraling, because it wasn't just that I failed at something, it was that I started seeing myself as a failure. And that belief kept me playing small for years. That is, until self-leadership entered the picture and shifted everything for me. Because once I learned how to separate what happened from who I am, and once I realized that failure is not the enemy, it is simply information, once I realized these things, I was able to stop beating myself up and start building myself up. And this shift in my relationship with failure was incredibly important. Because here is the ugly truth. Left unchecked, failure doesn't just sting when it happens, right? It messes with your head. It has a residual effect. It shakes confidence and it plants seeds of doubt. And it can make you question if the risks are even worth it. And if you are anything like the high-achieving professionals that I work with, then you've probably set some pretty high standards for yourself, which means when things don't go according to plan, the self-judgment can be brutal. But this is where self-leadership changes the game, because how you think about failure, what you make it mean about who you are, can either shut you down or it can fuel you through your next breakthrough. And I've seen both. I've lived both. And for a long time, I had a really toxic relationship with failure. It felt like proof that I didn't belong in the rooms that I was trying to step into. But what I've learned, both through experience and my doctoral research, and what I now teach every client I work with, is this: failure is not the enemy. It is simply feedback. And when you learn how to use it as such, your setbacks quickly become guideposts that help move you forward. Hello, friend. I am Dr. Laura Miner, a board-certified leadership coach, and welcome to my channel, where we talk about how to fuel your success with the science of self-leadership. Because who you are is how you lead. And when you learn how to lead yourself first, outer impact follows. In this video, I'm going to share how one mindset shift surrounding your relationship with failure can unlock more clarity, confidence, and momentum than you can even imagine. And as always, I will coach you through a framework to help you get results. But first, I want to share a quick story. Early in my coaching career, so we're talking pre-Zoom here, I had spent months prepping for a workshop that I believed in with my whole heart. I was so excited for it. I promoted it, built the materials, rehearsed the delivery. This was going to be my signature thing. And then only 2 people showed up. 2! I had chairs for 20. I was so embarrassed. I was frustrated. And to be honest, my inner critic at that point fully took over and went into overdrive. And I found myself flooded with thoughts like, maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe people don't value what I do. Maybe I should go back and get a real job. If current me could go back and visit my 2010 self, I would coach her in a whole different way. And I would arm her with a question that I now teach all my clients. What if this is simply feedback and not failure? Because the truth is, That workshop was a success. I just couldn't see it in the moment. But it did give me the opportunity to test and refine my approach in a real world setting, which then led to it being the first draft of something even better. And that's the thing. When you choose to see failures as feedback surrounding your progress and not as a final verdict, it empowers you to stay in motion. And this deliberate choice is self-leadership in action. Because self-leaders don't just bounce back from failure, they extract meaning from it. They experiment, they reflect, and then they use the information to adapt and grow. And to be clear, it's not that self-leaders avoid mistakes. It's just that they have the tools and resources that prevent their mistakes from defining them. Now, it's also important to mention that this approach is not about toxic positivity or pretending that failure doesn't sting. Of course it does, sometimes really badly. But this is about changing the story so that failures become empowering instead of limiting. So let me walk you through the exact same technique I use with my coaching clients. But first, if you are resonating with this content and finding value in what I'm sharing, would you please do me a favor and hit that like button? It lets me know that my content is hitting the mark, but it also lets YouTube know that these insights are worth sharing. Okay, on to the technique. I call it the failure flip because it flips failure from something that shuts you down into something that fuels you forward. And here's how it works. The next time that something doesn't go as planned, I want you to pause and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what did you learn about yourself, the process, or the context? This question is about zooming out, and it's designed to help you step back from the emotional charge of the moment and look at the bigger picture. Because when something doesn't go as planned, our brains often want to collapse the entire experience into one negative conclusion. But zooming out helps you interrupt that pattern and gather insights instead. Maybe you learned something about your mindset, like how you tend to over-prepare if you're anxious. Or maybe you learned something about the process, like realizing you skipped a step that matters more than you thought. The point is, when you zoom out, you shift from self-blame to self-awareness. And that shift gives you the power to make intentional, informed choices going forward. Because remember, failure is not a dead end, it is simply data. And question number 1 helps you collect that data. Okay, now on to the second question, which is what do you want to do differently next time? This question is all about moving from reflection to deliberate action. But to be clear, it's not about fixing anything or getting it perfect. It's about applying what you've learned in a way that helps you keep moving forward and maintaining momentum. Because once you've zoomed out and gathered insights, you have the information needed to experiment with a different approach. And we're not talking about overhauling everything here. We're just looking at making one small, thoughtful change that moves you forward with purpose. Because when you approach failure in this way, you stop being reactive and you start becoming intentional. In other words, you start operating by design instead of by default. Okay, so with question 2 answered, it is time to move on to our third question, which is what part of this can you be proud of even if the outcome wasn't perfect? This question is especially important because often Our default mode when something doesn't work out is to focus on what went wrong and ignore everything that we did right. But self-leadership means recognizing the whole picture. Maybe you stepped outside your comfort zone. That's a win. Or maybe you advocated for yourself in a way that felt bold. Or perhaps you showed more resilience than you ever have before. Whatever it is, take a moment to name it. Out loud, on paper, in your journal, it doesn't matter where, just name it and make it real. Because when you acknowledge what went well, you start to see yourself differently. You realize that progress doesn't always show up in the results. Sometimes it shows up in who you are becoming in the process. And that identity shift, that is what makes you unstoppable. Now, if you want to take this practice a step further, I've got a fun bonus step for you. The next time something goes sideways, I want you to excitedly declare how fascinating. Yes, out loud and with energy. This is a phenomenal technique I'm borrowing from The Art of Possibility, which is a great read, by the way, if you haven't read it yet. And while it might feel a little ridiculous at first, there is real power in it. Because when you excitedly say, how fascinating, you are interrupting your inner critic. And you're inviting curiosity into the equation instead of letting it be ruled by judgment. That declaration trains your brain to see mistakes as moments of discovery instead of disaster. And that is at the heart of the failure flip. Because you're no longer making failure mean something about your worth. You're using it to strengthen your wisdom. And that is self-leadership in action. So here's what I want you to take from this. The goal is not to avoid failure because hiccups will always line the path to success. Instead, the goal is to stop letting failure hijack your identity because you can fail at something without being a failure. You can get it wrong and still be on the right path. You can fall short and still be moving forward because self-leadership isn't about getting it perfect. It's about staying in motion. And when failure becomes an intentional part of the process, that is when momentum kicks in. And that's when things start to shift. This is when you start leading yourself from a place of wisdom instead of fear. And that, my friends, is what creates real lasting impact, both personally and professionally. Okay, I know that was a lot, but now that we have tackled how you see failure, let's flip the script on how you define success. In my next video, we're gonna dive into a tool that I use with clients when they're feeling stuck or restless or just quietly misaligned. And I'll let you in on a little secret. It doesn't start with what you want. It actually starts with what you are no longer willing to tolerate. So if you have ever had that quiet sense of, I don't want this, but I'm not sure what comes next, then meet me here and we will use that tension as a springboard and build something powerful from it. So I will meet you there when you are ready, my friend.